welcome back to the Rochester Local Podcast. My name is Becky Monpetit. I am the owner of Rochester Local, and today I'm joined by Marty Walsh. Hi, Marty.
Hi, Becky.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
How was the walk down from your house?
Mostly snow-free.
Yeah.
Brisker than it should have been.
No, I know.
But it's going in the right direction.
Marty and I are neighbors, and so he just did a quick little jaunt over here, and I'm so glad that he's with us in the studio today. Before we get started, I want to say a thank you to our sponsors, First Alliance Credit Union and the Edit Shop for the beautiful styling of our Rochester Local Podcast studio. All right, Marty, should we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So there are many fascinating things about Marty Walsh, but I am going to start with what I think is one of the most intriguing things about you right now, which is the Minnesota Driftless Trail.
Yes.
That's what it's called, right? Driftless Hiking Trail.
Yes, Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail.
Yeah, please tell me all about that.
Sure. So, the Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail, our mission, it's more of a project than a trail right now. But our mission is to build a 100-plus mile backpacking focused trail across the driftless area of Minnesota.
Yes.
So most people do not necessarily know what the driftless area is.
Yes, I'm glad that you're going to describe it. Yep.
So I was thinking if you're driving from Rochester to Chicago, you cross most of the driftless. It's all like the cool bluffs.
Yes.
It's Lanesboro, it's Decorah, it's La Crosse. And geologically speaking, it's the result of the last glaciers didn't scrape that part of the country clean.
Right.
So drift refers to the little tiny rocks that are left over from glaciers.
Yep.
This is a fun fact. It's named that because they thought those rocks are in places where glaciers were.
Yeah.
Because they floated on Noah's flood.
Oh.
So that's where that came from. And the driftless is driftless because the glacier was never there to pulverize stuff down to little pebbles.
Yes.
So it's all the cool bluffs and the winding rivers and all that stuff.
It's why our part of the state is picturesque with these bluffs and valleys, and a lot of Minnesota is flat.
Correct.
Yes. Flat. And I think it kind of gets into karst geology, which is not this podcast episode, but another podcast episode.
Yes. Yeah. So like, because there's an underlying karst geology and then it didn't get glaciated, all it combines to this magical thing that's in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa.
Yeah.
So that's why we specifically say the Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail. And then hiking because we have some great trails. We have great water trails. We have great bike trails. We have ATV and snowmobile trails. This is a backpacking trail.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are going to be familiar with the Superior Hiking Trail here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Or like the Appalachian Trail, or the Pacific Crest Trail, like Cheryl Strayed's Wild book. That, but shrunk down to like 100, 125 miles is our goal.
Okay, so how did this idea start?
So professionally, I work in community and economic development. And I used to be the economic development director for one of the counties that we're working on, Fillmore County. We were working on recreation, where can people go, canoeing, biking, all that stuff. And it was very obvious that hiking was a missing piece. Yeah. So we started working on that. I left that job, kept on backpacking. I've done a lot of backpacking and hiking, and kind of came back around to it when I had some free time. So we can do this. Yeah. And drew some maps, shared the maps with some people, and said, what do you think? And the groundswell of support just said, yes, have to do this right now.
Yeah. When I first learned about it, I think it was maybe a year ago, you were just kind of starting to do some exploration on actual land and talking with landowners and these sorts of things. And recently you went off and did like a part of what could be the future trail, right?
Yeah. So last summer was already. It's been like the timeline is all messed up.
Oh my goodness.
So it was last June, myself and another one of our neighbors, Andy
shout out,
went and did what we called the test hike. So we did 25 miles, primarily on public land and roads. All on public land and roads. And just to prove like, hey, this can be done. The landscape is interesting. It's engaging. It's safe. And so we've done that. And then since then, we have been working, doing a lot of public outreach, trying to get people. So we've had landowners sign off and say, yep, you can walk across our land. Minnesota has some really great laws for that. Protecting landowners. Sure. They allow access. And last month or 2 months ago now, did an event at Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center in Lanesboro with 140 attendees.
Amazing.
And that's just really exploded the amount of attention we have from podcasts like this and newspapers, and we'll be doing some events up in the cities this summer and more. Because right now it's really about awareness of landowners. We are working with the DNR. We'll cross a lot of DNR land, but that's going to be a process.
Yes.
And so we also need to be concurrently working with landowners to figure out where we can go.
Sure. Wow. Seriously, so much excitement. And I love that there's been so much support and enthusiasm, because I think it's going to be a great asset to southeastern Minnesota. I'm so excited that you're spearheading it.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
It's been super fun and super exciting, because like the people who know it love it.
Yeah.
And then there's people in the backpacking community that we meet online and they're like, what is that? I've never even heard of this place. What is this?
Right.
And so it's drawing a lot of attention. It has the ability to like expand what we already have, but also add a whole new dimension. And if you're a backpacker, it kind of is not super fun that it's 4, 6, 8 hours to a really great long distance trail.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So this adds it. And if you're south of us, if you're in Des Moines, if you're in Chicago, this is way closer than anything.
Sure. Yeah. Well, really exciting. And so if people want to know more about the Driftless Trail, where can they go? What can they do?
Sure. So our website is mndriftlesshikingtrail.org.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of our socials, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, are at Hike MN Driftless.
At Hike MN Driftless.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, that was like, I couldn't wait to ask that question for the podcast, so I just led off with it because it's so cool and so fascinating. But now we're going to go backwards.
Okay.
Okay. So now that we've talked about the Driftless Trail, I want to know how long you've lived in Rochester, and if it's not been for like your whole life, what brought you here?
Okay. So my wife and I bought our house in Rochester in summer of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, we were living in Chatfield for about 6 months at my in-laws' house.
Yeah.
And then before that, for 8.5 years, we were in Mason City, Iowa.
Okay.
And I'm looking for a career change, looking to a lifestyle change, a lot of things, and got a job up here. So came up here to do that economic development work.
Yeah.
And we'd come up a few different times, kind of scouting it out or for fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's an easy, relatively cheap place to go on vacation
Yeah.
if you're locally. drop the kiddo off the grandparents and go have fun.
Sure.
And just found it was the right size for us. It had a lot of opportunities for us.
Mm-hmm.
We came up the weekend that was the deciding factor. We came up. We were supposed to go somewhere else, and there was a storm, so we came here instead. Stayed at a hotel downtown. Did the farmers market Saturday morning. Did art on the Ave. Didn't know art on the Ave existed, and like we're seeing these people walk out of the neighborhood with all this cool stuff.
Yes.
And we just wander in there, and we're like, okay, Rochester is cooler than we recognize.
Shout out to Art on the Avenue.
An amazing entity. And it's cooler than we recognize. We maybe need to look seriously at living here, and that kind of kicked off the whole process and said, all right, here we are.
Oh, and we're so glad you ended up here in a very cool house, I might add. Your house is like one of the coolest in the neighborhood for sure. It's like tucked into trees. It feels very much like you're in the forest in your house, right?
Yeah, it's very wooded. It's kind of like that last generation of houses that got built in the 70s before there was a planning department. So there's all sorts of weird things about it.
It's like built into the hill, kind of.
Yeah,
like
it's a view of
cool
downtown.
Architecture and cool roof angles, and yeah, it's very, very cool. So you mentioned the farmers market, and I couldn't wait to ask you this question too. I kind of sprung it on you right before we started, but you love the farmers market. And before I ask you why, I love that you on social media oftentimes will go to the farmers market and you will come back and you'll say, hey, Rochester, you all need to get to the farmers market, and here's why. Here's what I picked up. Here's what you can pick up. Here's what I made with what I picked up. And I love that because it basically ushers people into an easy experience at the farmers market. So now I want to know why. Why do you like the farmers market so much?
So great question. And it's a very involved question. Maybe more involved than you anticipated.
Probably.
So passion for local foods goes back to college. I went to school at St. John's, and we had in St. Joe, it's like population 5,000, including the students at the time.
Yeah.
One of the best farmers markets I've ever been to. 40, 50 vendors. You could get flour. You could get honey. You could get sunflower seed oil. You could get meat, veggies, dried herbs.
Yeah.
And got really into that. And then as an economics student at the time, studying the flow of money and the interactions of cash, all that stuff really just spoke to me loudly. And through my professional career, I've had the chance to manage a farmer's market in Mason City, and I've seen the challenges that brings. I've been an entrepreneurial, business coach, things like that. And so I understand what these people are going through.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent. The trail is a part of this, of like loving where you live, learn to love and celebrate what you already have.
Right.
The farmer's market is like the best way we can do that in the Midwest.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that wasn't as long of an answer as I thought you were going to.
It could have gone longer.
It could.
I'm coaching myself.
The farmer's market is one of my very favorite things in the city. I love it. There is very rarely a farmer's market that I miss. I think it's so special, and I think it's an incredible way to get to know the community at large and who's producing food and what they're producing. I mean, it's very surprising to be like, oh, wow, there are mushroom farmers. Or, there used to be somebody, I don't know, I haven't seen him for a while, but he had ginger and just the incredible bounty that comes within a 30-mile radius.
Yeah, I mean, there's the ginger guy is still there, but he like runs out of stuff every year.
Yes.
But he also goes turmeric, so you can get the turmeric. That's really good too.
Yes.
Shout out to Turmeric Man.
Yeah.
The bad thing is I don't know. This is where I'm bad. I don't know most of these people's names.
Right. It's like, oh, there's a smoked trout place.
Right.
Oh, there's the ginger guy.
Yep. I know. Like, they're the people on the far left. When you walk in the door, they're on the left on the end cap. Like,
yes,
that's how I describe them.
Yes, exactly.
When you're not the manager of the market, you don't know these things.
Right.
So yeah, there's an amazing diversity of Cappers, Big Red Barn Milk out of Chatfield, and the Stockton Trout Farm.
Yes.
And like, you could do all of your shopping there if you wanted to.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Super cool. All right. So now we're going to jump into some Rochester related questions. Okay. So, Marty, we have talked about a couple of different things. We know that you like hiking and backpacking. You know that you like going to the farmer's market, but you have 8 hours of uninterrupted Rochester time. Where are you going? Who are you taking? What are you doing?
I thought about this question, and I'm going to answer in the easiest to hardest so I can maybe think of the third part. So, what am I doing is eating. I think that Rochester does a really great job having a wide variety. There's some amazing restaurateurs out there. I think that has evolved some.
Yeah.
We were just at Otori Soshi last night. I'm just going to keep on throwing out businesses' names, whether they're sponsors or not. Sorry, that's your problem.
I love it.
So I think we would probably hit the bike trail on like an e-bike on the rentals or the Lime scooter and just hit up Prescott's and Redwood Room and Chez Bogie and Blue Duck and Otori and Flapdoodles and
You're
just
gonna be
eat
full.
and eat and eat and eat. I will throw out one like critique.
Yeah.
That I think that we struggle with in Rochester is some menus, especially some tap lists and cocktail menus, are a little static.
Oh, you think so?
And I think I get why, because especially if your clientele is medical destination clientele, they're here once.
Right.
Like they don't know that it's the same 7 beers that have been on tap for the last 2 years.
Oh, gotcha.
And the same menu because they're looking to eat there once.
So you're looking for a little variety.
I wish there was a little more turnover on some things. But yeah, so I'm eating, I'm riding, doing active things. I think the bike trails are great, going down to the river. And I think my only stipulation on who I'd bring is people who will share their food. Because I know some people are not into sharing food. But I cannot afford, even in an imaginary world, to buy all the food I want to try.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing samplers.
Yeah. So it's like you get this and I'll get this and then we switch and we trade.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, my husband AJ is notorious because regardless of whether or not I want to share my food or not, he's literally always going to steal a bite. Always.
It's the way to do things.
So it sounds like you guys are. Yeah.
We can go to lunch.
Fast friends. Perfect. All right. So let's see. What are 2 things your friends would say about you? Not necessarily a Rochester question, but an interesting one.
One would be, and this is like a name I use on stuff, serial hobbyist, like always trying new things, which I've learned to just like love it and own it and be okay with it. So like, how long is this hobby going to last? It's not going to be long. It's going to be days, weeks.
Don't say that about the Driftless Trail.
So that's not a hobby. That's like a passion thing. So
a life pursuit.
Exactly. But so that's one thing, like always trying new things, always doing whatever. And I think then that spills into always having an interesting take on things, always like tying things together. So that's a professional thing. It's a personal history thing, having such a varied personal history, always able to connect to random things. And some people have noted, like, if we meet, I'm going to ask you like a lot of random questions, and I'm going to play the who do we know game.
Oh,
and I'm always fascinated to find like that we know this random person, not through Rochester, but like, oh, your cousin is married to my second cousin's friend who works at the casino with him in Arizona. Yeah. Like that's the game that I play.
I think we're all so much more connected than we realize, and we'd probably find out so much more if we had those deeper questions.
Yeah.
Questions or opportunities to. Cool. So you're a serial hobbyist, and you're going to ask those.
I am, and it's
eccentric questions.
And in part, I've learned this about myself, that's how I remember people, and I kind of like index them. So I have like multiple search terms in my brain, like, right, this is Becky. She lives on the street from Andy. She has a podcast, like, and then I can like remember like this podcast and go from there.
Yeah.
So
cool. That's a cool way of kind of filtering things in your life. I like that a lot. All right. So up next, what is something you find really interesting about Rochester?
There's a lot interesting about Rochester.
True. Yes.
One thing is that we have very little, like, the way the city grew.
Yeah.
Is very unusual for other cities, right? Because we were like this little tiny farm town, 15, 20,000 people, and now we're 120, 125,000 people. But all of that growth happened like from the 50s on.
Yes.
And so, well, we have a downtown, which is also weird for a city of 120,000 people to have the size of downtown we do. And it's way more lively than people give it credit for.
I agree.
Then we have this, and we have like a couple of old pre-war neighborhoods, Slatterly, Kutsky, Pill Hill, like that.
Yeah.
But I think that less than 10% of houses in Rochester are before 1940.
Really?
Yeah, and that shapes the city. So it's interesting in that it's very sprawly.
It is pretty sprawled.
Yeah. But it's interesting how we've adapted to that, right? Yeah. Like we have really amazing sushi in a strip mall. We have all these little things, and like that doesn't stop us from doing cool things,
right?
But the physical layout of Rochester belies the culture that has emerged here.
That's a really interesting observation, and I like that you say that because, like you said, this amazing sushi in a strip mall on the northwest part of town, it actually feels...
Can you guess what I had for dinner last night?
Yeah, I can. It actually feels a little metropolitan in a way because that's the way that it is in bigger cities too. You get some of these this amazing, oftentimes ethnic foods in like maybe a strip mall.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So it's interesting that you brought that up, and a really good point. If 10%, huh?
That's what I remember. I was looking up for a different project, and it's a very, very low number that you'd expect. Because most cities, like, if you didn't get big then, you're never going to get that big, unless you're maybe a suburb. But we're not a suburb. We are our own thing.
And, I will say there are a lot of reasons why I like Rochester. There better be. I mean, I've got this whole business, based on Rochester. But I will say, when you go up to the cities and you're headed, like you're going to something in a suburb or something like this, there's no downtown. There's no character. Right. There's no anything. So you've got like a city like Eden Prairie or whatever. Well, you're not going to have a quaint downtown in Eden Prairie. Right. You're not going to have a quaint downtown in Bloomington or Apple Valley or anything like this. So you might have proximity to more option or whatever, but where does that vibrancy come from, and how is it created in some of these newer communities? And that's what I really appreciate about Rochester, is it can be this smaller community, but it also has this, downtown.
And I think we're at a point where we're kind of figuring out what that means as a community, right? Yeah. There's maybe some legacy business players who are aging out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great new people coming up and taking advantage of like the post-pandemic stuff.
Sure.
And I think that for any change we have seen the last few years, we're going to see way more change in the next 5 years.
Agreed. I think that we are on the cusp. What are your thoughts on the Rochester geese?
I don't have a lot of thoughts on the Rochester geese. No, like everywhere I've lived has had a ton of geese and birds. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
And like I get like Rochester's like the Rochester goose, like the subspecies that was thought to be extinct and all that.
Yes, the giant
cool
Canada
stuff.
Goose, right?
Yes, yeah, I think that, Canadensis giganticus or whatever.
Oh wow! Look
I don't think that's the real name. It's
throwing it
something
out,
like
Marty.
So, I mean, they're cool. It's good to have like a thing to bond to. But there's also the crows. And in our neighborhood, the deer.
Yes.
The deer and the deer.
The deer.
Yes.
The deer. Yes.
So, yeah, the geese are a thing.
That are here.
But one of the benefits of being a little lower density community is like we do have crazy bird watching in town. So like when we do maple syrup, we see sandhill cranes and trumpeter swans. And we had a stupid family of merlins that lived at our house 2 years ago, and they ate all of our chickadees.
No.
It was off. So we like loved them for 2 weeks. We named them Merle and Lynn. And then
that's so clever.
Hate them. We hate them with a passion. And if we hear them on our walks, we're like, oh God, no, they're back. It's a really weird family dynamic.
You seen did you see the pileated woodpecker when I was in the neighborhood a couple years ago?
We see them pretty much weekly still at our house.
At your house, you do?
Yeah. If you want to see pileated woodpeckers, just hang out at ours for a couple hours.
Are you kidding? I've only seen him twice.
Oh, yeah.
I've only seen him twice. How many times have you seen foxes in your backyard, though?
A dozen, maybe.
Really? Yeah, you win. You're just much more wooded than we are here. I've seen foxes like 3 times.
And my wife's like office overlooks the yard. It's like she's like constantly eyes in the yard. We had a fox for a while, almost daily, and we learned that the crows would start cawing in a certain direction from the house, and then we're like, oh, the crows are cawing in Jay's backyard. We have to go look, and then we'd see the fox go past.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh, man. You just got to learn to listen to nature.
Oh, Marty, that's like a whole like Mr. Rogers episode or like another podcast altogether. That's a good one. All right, so fill in the blank. Rochester needs a
small pub on the north side of town.
Oh, that's a good answer. So are you saying like north of 37th Street?
No. Just like in the Silver Lake Bridge area.
Oh.
But I feel like I'm doing a lot of complaining. It's not complaining, it's improving. It's taking good and making it better.
You're suggesting.
Another thing I've noticed about a lot of Rochester restaurants is they're big.
Yeah.
And there's regulatory reasons for that.
Sure.
There's a lot of zoning and building code and liquor license things that cause that. But I don't think that if you have like a 5,000 square foot restaurant, it's not a great place to build community.
Yeah.
And so I wish we had more, 15, 20, 25 seat small bars, small plates. I think Thirsty Belgian does this amazingly well. Like if you could just have a second Thirsty Belgian on the north side of Broadway, that would be wonderful.
Hint. Thirsty Belgian owner.
Yes.
Right? You know him, don't you?
Yeah. I just from...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would like something that's walkable.
Yes. And so maybe another, like, same answer but different. So I'm just going to answer the question twice.
Perfect.
Is Rochester needs a change in the laws around where we can have businesses.
So there can be things that are more walkable.
Right. Like if
in a neighborhood.
Yes. So if you could have a coffee shop like our super block that we're in, so Northeast, Northern Heights area, 14th, 37th Broadway to East Circle, there's no businesses.
None. It's a huge chunk of town.
Yeah. So it's over a mile for us to walk to the nearest coffee shop.
Yes. And
for me, it's a little less for you, but not much less.
Not much less. I mean, I'm not complaining about the topography, but there is also a giant hill.
There's a giant hill. But even if you live at the bottom of the hill, it can still be a mile.
It is true. And I oftentimes think how nice it would be to just have a bodega or a corner market. And just to get the small grocery things that you need. Like I said, in the middle of this northeast chunk of where we live, it's just houses. Yeah.
And a place to meet your neighbors. Like even if it was like somebody converted their garage into a coffee shop wine bar. That'd be perfect.
Oh, Marty, you can
to
do
interact
that,
with.
please?
No, you can't here, unfortunately.
I know. Can you do something about that, please?
I bet somebody listening could.
Somebody listening. Get in contact with Marty. Marty. Okay, we're gonna wrap these things. We're gonna wrap this up here. What is the best Rochester adventure you've been on?
Taking adventure to heart. last fall. So we like to go canoeing.
Yeah.
We go canoeing. I think another thing that Southeast Minnesota has great is we have these amazing rivers. They're super interesting without being very technical. Mm-hmm. And we took our canoe down to right behind the rec center.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And we paddled from there to just shy of Lake Zumbro.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was almost 4 hours of canoeing.
Yeah.
10 minutes of driving. Because of the way that the river goes back and forth. So it was super easy. We drove up there in our better canoe carrying car and parked our car at the canoe takeout on 75th.
Yep. Yes.
Drove back in the Prius.
Yeah.
I could drive the canoe from my house to the rec center on the Prius. Like, that was fine.
Yes.
Left the car there. We went paddling for the day. We saw 10 houses probably, but there's bald eagles and there's falcons and there's herons and there's lots of geese.
Yes.
And all these other awesome songbirds. Yes. We saw these two kids who were totally they were like 10-year-old boys probably breaking rocks, but they may as well have been murdering somebody because they were like, oh no, there's people. And that was, just the Zumbro River, nature in the city was an amazing adventure.
You're not the only podcast guest to talk to me about how awesome the canoeing is. Actually, Lita Casper, she was like podcast number 5, I think. She also talked about how amazing the Zumbro is and how isolated you feel and how just truly, like you said, you drove 10 minutes total and you are in this beautiful area where you can see so much of the nature. And I think that the Zumbro affords us a lot of that. And it's underutilized too.
Very underutilized, yeah.
Yeah. So can you do something about that too, Marty?
Well, it's kind of nice to be underutilized because there's like no competition.
You did tell me that you were a cereal hobbyist. So first you have to get a coffee wine shop.
Yeah.
Next, you have to don't overutilize the Zumbro. Yes. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so we've reached a part of the podcast where we are going to pull out our sticker board. Woo! And you are going to put a sticker on the board of
Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail.
Oh!
I mean, shameless self-promotion. That's what this is all
You had to.
about.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Put it on
so
there.
So let's see if I can peel this safely. I probably should have started peeling this like 5 minutes ago.
That's fine. No
Adrian's
pressure.
Going to love all the clicky, sticky sounds.
That's fine.
Come on, I don't
we'll
have
just kind of
fingernails.
like talk about it. You can just pretend. You can just kind of shove it up there.
There we go.
Oh, you got it.
I got it.
Okay, wherever you want.
Oh, my friend Abe.
Yeah.
What about the chateau? We'll do the nature theme together.
Perfect. Excellent. Ooh, I like that you have your own sticker. I'm gonna have to get another sticker from you for my own personal collection.
We'll get that to you.
Marty, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And for all the work you do.
Oh, no, it's a lot of fun. I like that you came on the podcast, and I like that you're my neighbor. So hopefully we'll see you again soon now that it's warmer. It's supposed to be warmer.
It's pretending to be spring.
Right. Anyways, well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Rochester Local Podcast. See you around town.